Talks on a post-Brexit deal between the EU and the UK still ongoing in Brussels. Some might say they're floundering. But there is an agreement with the United States to keep transatlantic business going. And here with that and all the rest of the business is Kate Moody. Kate, tell us what's been happening.
Well, only just a little bit of transatlantic business. It's important to state here. This is a bilateral customs mutual assistance agreement. It was signed in the U.S. Embassy in London earlier today, and it's essentially a rollover of the status quo when it comes to customs. A statement from the British Treasury said the deal would help to combat customs fraud by sharing information and laying the groundwork for trade between importers and exporters on both sides of the Atlantic. The Allies will still have to negotiate a broader trade deal, and incoming President Joe Biden could prove tough on certain issues. It is, though, a crucial and symbolic step for the UK as it tries to solidify ties with its most important non-European trading partner. Last week, the UK said it would suspend tariffs on American imports from January 1st. The EU had imposed them as part of a long-running transatlantic trade spat over illegal subsidies to plane makers Airbus and Boeing. Meanwhile, Facebook says it will shift legal responsibility for British users from its EU headquarters in Ireland to the US next year after the Brexit transition period ends. British users' data will no longer be covered by the EU's General Data Protection Regulation on privacy. The UK plans to bring in its own standards. Internet search giant Google announced a similar move back in February. Well, last week, Facebook was the target of two major lawsuits for anti-competitive behavior. Now, 10 U.S. states are filing an antitrust lawsuit against Google. The Attorney General of Texas, who's leading that legal action, accuses the tech giant of abusing its power, in particular when it comes to online advertising. Ken Paxton is a Republican who recently led the ill-fated attempt to overturn the presidential election result at the Supreme Court. He said Google has engaged in market collusion and actions which, quote, harm every person in America. Google has dismissed those allegations, but it is facing a number of other probes in the U.S. and elsewhere about its market dominance. Along with other tech giants, including Facebook, Apple, and Amazon, it's seeing more scrutiny and regulation around the world. The U.S. Federal Reserve has said it will continue to use all the tools at its disposal to protect the economy as it recovers from the effects of the coronavirus pandemic. That will include keeping interest rates near zero through 2023 and continuing to buy at least $120 billion worth of bonds each month. The central bank said it expects U.S. GDP to fall just 2.4% in 2020. That's compared to a projected decline of 3.7%, which was outlined in September. Its slightly brighter picture for next year also reflects the expected impact of emerging COVID-19 vaccines. But Jerome Powell, the head of the Federal Reserve, said the labor market would be slower to recover than it initially forecast, and that would require continued support. Take a listen.
Participation in the labor market remains notably below pre-pandemic levels. Although there has been much progress in the labor market since the spring, we will not lose sight of the millions of Americans who remain out of work. Even so, the current economic downturn is the most severe of our lifetimes. It will take a while to get back to the levels of economic activity and employment that prevailed at the beginning of this year. And it may take continued support from both monetary and fiscal policy to achieve that.
Jerome Powell wrapping up the last Fed policy meeting of 2020 with a slightly brighter outlook than in past meetings. Well, that statement did give a bit of a boost to Wall Street, although we saw the Dow Jones closing slightly lower. The S&P 500 and NASDAQ did manage to end in positive territory there. There's a bit of optimism in Washington that lawmakers could be inching towards a compromise on another round of stimulus and relief funds, which would protect and support American businesses and households. The major European indices closed higher. The FTSE 100 up nearly 0.9 of a percentage point in London. The DAX up 1.5% in Frankfurt. Meanwhile, Bitcoin broke above $20,000 for the first time ever this Wednesday. Moving on to some of the day's other business headlines now. The U.S. has labeled Switzerland and Vietnam as currency manipulators, accusing them of intervening to control the value of their currencies against the dollar, in part to gain a trade advantage over American exports. Swiss authorities immediately rejected the charge. The Treasury Department said 10 other countries should be monitored, including China, Japan, South Korea, India, and Germany. Beijing was removed from the manipulator list just in January. French prosecutors are investigating possible tax fraud at the luxury group Kering. The probe has been underway for nearly 2 years, but was just confirmed this Wednesday. Authorities are looking into whether the group, which owns brands including Yves Saint Laurent and Gucci, had set up a system to declare third-party activities in Switzerland. And the UK's top court has given the green light to an expansion of Heathrow Airport, which would include constructing a third runway. The controversial project had been halted in February after a judge ruled in favour of climate change campaigners who were protesting against it. The Supreme Court has now overturned that decision. 5 years ago, the then Mayor of London, now Prime Minister Boris Johnson, had vowed to lie down in front of bulldozers if needed to stop that expansion. His government, Mark, saying that he has taken note of the court's decision and will respond accordingly.
It'll be interesting to see how that one turns out, won't it? Kate, thank you very much indeed. Kate Moody there with all the business. Thank you.